Hello, everyone. I am joined right now by a very special guest, Brendan Conway. Thank you so much for joining me today. Brendan, can you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
I'm a co-owner of Magpie Games, and I'm a developer, designer, dev editor on a number of our products. Probably most known for works on Masks: A New Generation, Root, the tabletop role-playing game, and Avatar, the tabletop role-playing game.
Yeah, we love masks in this house here.
Nice, that's great to hear. Yep.
But about mask a little bit, I wanted to start, kind of at that macro level a little bit. So many of the products that Magpie has released, if not all, I don't want to, make a blanket statement there, but it uses, some form or variation of the Powered by the Apocalypse.
We call it the Powered by the Apocalypse framework. Most of the time, it's notated by just the Powered by the Apocalypse button on the back of the book or something. And as that name suggests, it originated with Apocalypse World, a game by D. Vincent Baker and Megway Baker. And I want to say the first edition of that, gosh, what is time? Came out in the early 2010s.
Long time ago.
Yeah. It's so weird to think back and realize how long that was. But yeah, that was the origin point, and they were kind enough to encourage other works inside of that framework. And so then we sort of took it and ran with it. We call it a framework because the way we think about it is each of those games are their own system. They have their individual needs, and you really have to mold and shape the design to do the specific thing of that game. The overall sort of ideas and ethos is similar. The like goals, the way we think about the interaction of the players and the GM, they are often pretty similar across the games. But the actual system, it can look like, oh, you roll 2 6-sided dice in any of these games, but that's not the system. We put out a game called Zombie World that uses cards, and it has no dice in it at all. Some people will say it's the playbooks. Every player in a Powered by the Apocalypse game gets a playbook.
Let's really dig in on playbook there.
For sure, yeah. So as a starting point, like the way in a lot of the time is to be like, a playbook is like a class. But the difference between a playbook and a class, if I had to really try to put a finger on it, is that playbooks are describing an overarching character arc, and they may not tell you exactly what it is, but the rules of the playbook, the powers it gives you, the particular things that are provided on it, all send you on a trajectory. You can land in a bunch of different places. But we know that, generally speaking, the trajectory for, say, in Masks, there's the Bull playbook, and that means you punch things and you think, the best way to solve any given problem is to smack it in the face, and it's like a Wolverine kind of playbook. So yeah, you're going to be kind of on a Wolverine trajectory. But just by saying, like, Wolverine's one of those, but so too is Ms. America. It's America Chavez. Like, she's a Bull too. They don't really end up in the same place, even though they're the same playbook. But we can recognize the similarities between the two, and we can see how some pieces of their arc mirror each other. So that's the objective of a playbook. Yes, it's at their best and most fun. You're looking at it and you're like, oh, look at all these sweet powers. Essentially, look at these class abilities. Look at these awesome things I can get over time. Look at these awesome things I get to start. And it's super exciting just to see all of that. But the design side, the thing that I'm trying to do when I put together a playbook is I'm trying to make it say, but what is this likely to be about? I have no idea what your particular story will wind up being, but I'm going to help send you on a particular direction, and then you're going to take it from there. You're going to find out where it goes.
It just always seems to work really well when people get into it, because the thing that we just really like to stay away from at our tables is people just looking at each other and not knowing what to do and where to go next. And providing that within that framework, I think, is a really, really big part of it.
Yeah, we like to talk about playbooks as providing sort of a velocity, right? Like an initial
Like
direction that you're headed into, and you've got that speed and momentum. So worst comes to worst, you're not sure exactly what I should be doing. You can just default back to that. Well, if I'm the legacy playbook, that means I care about what my dad thinks. I'm going to go impress my dad.
Yeah.
And chances are, just in the process of doing that, I'll generate a whole ton more story.
Speaking of that framework, what is special and different and unique to Avatar Legends?
A couple things, and I can get into nitty-gritty about lots of individual little movements, but I would probably say, just surface level, these appear pretty early. Like, they're going to be noticeable to people who've played other games in the Powered by the Apocalypse framework. It's going to be the balance principles, and it's going to be the way that combats work. So the balance principles were us sort of paying attention to the way characters work in the original shows and trying to honor that. That's all. These characters are torn in multiple directions, and In Masks, for example, you're trying to kind of figure out who you are, but in Avatar, it's like each character has their own struggle that defines what they are sort of seeking a balance point between. Whether it's proving yourself to be a true warrior worthy of your tradition, or finding a path that looks a little different. And I just described Sokka's sort of pull between his two balance principles. Aang, obviously, in the early seasons, has this really clear, well, I want to just be a kid. I don't really want all the responsibility of being the Avatar, and yet I am the Avatar. I don't really have a choice. And so
Yeah.
how do I manage these two incredibly complex and opposed ideas that are pulling me in different directions? So every single playbook in Avatar Legends, the role-playing game, has two balance principles, and their arc is kind of the question, how are you going to resolve this? Which one, if either, are you going to tend to? We know it's time for you to move on from that playbook when we know you've answered this question. You've already done that work, and you figured out, I accept the burden of being the Avatar. That's what I'm going to be, and now I should change to a different playbook.
The balance principles is one of the most just elegant and deep mechanics that I've seen in any of the numerous licensed IP games that I've played out there. And it's one of the things that captures the feel of the setting, unlike anything else. And I remember the first time that I saw it, I was a little like, yeah, I don't know. I was skeptical. I was like, not every character is going to feel like they're on this kind of art. This feels a little too, and to me, it was like, this is a little too lofty. And then I kind of checked myself as I started looking at that even more, that, and the character that really did this for me was Bolin from Legend of Korra, because I'm thinking about that character. And I'm thinking about, and what was interesting about it is, as I was thinking about, his journey and trying to, like fans always do, trying to fit him into, okay, what playbook is he, and all these things, and how does this work out? I took that full journey through that, of working it through and saying, wait a minute, this does work so, again, elegantly for a character even like Bolin, that on the surface you feel like is comic relief to some degree or whatever
Right.
else. And I came out on the whole other side of that through a role-playing mechanic that has been put in here on, well, hey, maybe that's why these Avatar shows are just so well made.
That's so great to hear. That's awesome. And that's exactly like the starting point for a lot of the playbooks is, okay, obviously we love this character. What can we do for this character? But then the ending point is the realization it can't just be that character, though. It has to be many. And we have to understand that those characters themselves skip playbooks. They bounce in and out of different playbooks. They change themselves as the shows go on, as their story changes. So it is so important to both be able to say, oh, yes, the hammer is Korra. Korra is the hammer that hits perfectly. And then to also say, but the hammer has to be able to do other stories, like similar stories, but other stories that aren't just Korra's. And then Korra herself moves on into other spaces and becomes different playbooks that define her later stories. So that's so much the balance of what we do. And it's so awesome to hear that, you can do it from your side. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I'm hoping we're talking about techniques next, right? Because if
for
we're
sure.
not, I'm going to bring that up. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So the combat system in general in Avatar, the role-playing game, is a little bit heavier, a little bit more prescribed. A lot of the time, the way we do action scenes and combats is this sort of cinematic. The GM is almost like a director or the person behind the camera and is pointing at different things and it's like, I'm going to stick with this moment for a few beats and then I'm going to flip somewhere else. And like, my job is not to oppose you or beat the crap out of you. My job is just to like paint an awesome action scene as things are happening. Here, we knew we had to reflect. These characters are doing awesome martial arts and they're doing crazy bending, and how do we actually capture any of that moment? And we worked with a bunch of our design team to really figure out, we think we need a more granular system. We think we need something that's going to give people real options. And while simultaneously, like if you're like, you're just up against a bunch of guys and they don't really matter, describe what cool things you do. You can just use one of the simpler basic moves for that and just skip past it. But when you get into that fight and it's Zuko versus Azula, we need something that really brings that fight out and makes it something everybody pays attention to and sits up for with real stakes. That's where the combat system kind of kicks in. And we have these series of exchanges where every character is picking one of three stances. You can be advancing and attacking, you can be defending and maneuvering, or you can be evading and observing. And each of those are sort of an overarching, like, a bunch of different techniques exist within those, but there are 3 core techniques for each that every single character has access to that define the basics of what that stance does. And then you have your own special techniques that refer to your training and the things you've learned and give you a menu of options to pick from. And so we sort of use all the different techniques that everybody's doing to paint the full picture of what happens in that round as you're, defending and raising a rock wall, but somebody else is watching you from a distance. They're evading and observing, and they're figuring out, oh, I see what they're up to. And they're preparing then to come at you in the next exchange. And it creates this great mix of things, of people taking different tacts in the middle of the fight.
I think it's fair to say that it adds, and again, I don't like these kind of labels and terms because people use them, too absolutely most of the time. But it's a little more crunchy and strategic,
yep.
To that. And I think again, it warrants it for the setting.
The amount of actual character expression you can still have in this exchange framework, with the beat in between the 2 exchanges where I say, please, let's stop fighting. And actually, for a moment, we go back to the basic moves, and maybe there's actually a chance we can stop this right here. Nobody's been taken out. We can maybe end this, but often maybe not. But even that, as a GM, one of the things I love is having the players predict which approach I'm going to use based on the character when they know this character is so mad at them. And they're like, oh, he's just going to advance an attack, isn't he? He's just going to come straight at us. We can respond to that. We can take advantage of that. I'm like, this is it, firing on all cylinders, not least because they know he's angry, because in a prior scene, they put the angry condition on him. So it's everything kicking into this perfect moment where I still, as the GM, I'm like, I'm trying to do, this character justice, but I don't have to somehow worry about playing him as the perfect ultimate opposition. I have to play him as him, using his tools and what he cares about to go after them and be like, I'm just going to come at you as hard as I can, because I am so mad at you kids.
Let's move on real quick because I'm terribly excited about Uncle Iroh's Adventure Guide.
Yeah, sure.
Not the least of which that Uncle Iroh is my favorite character in all of the things.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about this upcoming supplement. I know that we're, time's running out for the initial pre-order period here. That's going to end at the end of the month. I hope I'm getting that right. Is that right?
The final ending, the final close of the pre-orders is April 12th.
April the 12th, yes.
That's what we're headed for. That's I went to our website to make absolutely sure I was correct.
That's good. We're professionals here. We're professionals. Exactly. So what if somebody pre-orders before then? What happens? That essentially makes sure that they get the book shipped to them on the release date, right?
Yeah, they're getting the book. They're getting the PDF of the book.
And I want to mention that if you pre-order from Magpie's site, we also have made some updates. Magpie has to the storefront where you can add on the Avatar Legends NEXUS version of that too. And so it is a great way to save some money, but also this is something that back in my past life I've been trying to work for so long on bundling physical and digital, and Magpie has been such a great partner, and we've started doing that. And so it's an incredible opportunity to be able to do that. You should pre-order this, and we're about to talk about why. So what is going on in Uncle Iroh's Adventure Guide?
Uncle Iroh's Adventure Guide, we're sort of doing 2 kinds of books. We're doing a setting toolkit book, so we did Republic City as a setting toolkit. We're doing these adventure guides where we've done Wan Shi Tong's Adventure Guide, and this is Uncle Iroh's Adventure Guide. The idea is it's going to come with 5 pre-written adventures, 1 in each of the 5 eras of play. Those are for the main avatar. So there's the Kyoshi era, Roku, 100-Year War, Aang, and Korra. But this time, the special thing that we're doing is that it's all centered on a place called Jasmine Island. And Jasmine Island is famous for its golden jasmine tea. Because, of course, if you're going to do something for Uncle Iroh, it's got to be about tea.
Yeah, I love it.
The idea here is that there's this very special tea, that golden jasmine tea, and golden jasmine only grows here on Jasmine Island. So we're following that place through those 5 eras. The adventures are all set on Jasmine Island through myriad crises that it faces over the course of those 5 eras. And on the whole, it's designed so that you can actually play them through as almost a generational campaign with, your characters will help the island through its crisis in the first adventure, and they'll leave their mark. Like there might be statues of them left up in later eras, and then you'll play through the later era. But of course, that means that some bad guy's going to target the statue of your prior character to knock it down. And it creates this thing where by the end of the 5 eras worth of adventures, first of all, you played through several centuries of the game, but also you've created a Jasmine Island that's yours, that has been shaped by the actions of your characters over the course of many generations, that you've picked special things. The special system we have for this kind of generational play provides you with options at the end of each generation that you can change the island. We have it set up so that you start off with only the core 10 playbooks available to you, and you unlock playbooks as you play further and say like, oh yes, well, because we changed the island, we created a whole new faction on the island. We unlocked the playbook that's about leading a faction, and that becomes an option in the next adventure. We do lots of things like that so that it really becomes your island, but it's always in some degree of danger and trouble. So you've got to defend the very things that you helped build.
If it's not too spoilery, can we, like,
For sure.
what are our playbooks? Because I think we've mentioned one that might lead a faction.
Yeah, so 4 new playbooks. The one that might lead a faction is the authority. And your struggle as the authority is like, you're in charge, but that's this balancing act of, do I give the people I lead exactly what they want? Do I just become the thing they want me to be? Or do I sometimes have to use my own judgment, make my own call, try to lead them the way I feel is right? And you're constantly torn between those two sides with your 2 balance principles. We have the architect. So the architect is like, you invented something incredible. You built something incredible. And now there's a company or a group or a faction that is using that and like putting it out into the world. But you're not actually in charge of them. You just made the thing. And so you are struggling with almost the opposite of the authority, where you're like, I wish maybe I could control them more. I wish they would do what I wanted. I have this vision for what they could be, but they don't necessarily listen to me.
Just so much resonance with real life things here, Brendan. Like, wow,
yes,
unbelievable. Yeah, that's great. So,
and there's an aspect to a lot of these playbooks, especially because of this generational play thing, where they can skew a little older. They can skew more towards the older characters we see in Korra, for example, to give more options for playing those kind of characters, especially because in this generational play style, you can play a character in the 100-Year War era who then is the same person in the Aang era. The Aang era is only 14, 15 years, something like that, after the 100-Year War. But they will have changed, obviously. They might be a whole new playbook, just dealing with a whole new set of issues, as they are the one who took over, the island's defense, or they built something to help defend the island, and now as the architect, they are dealing with it. Or on the sad side, we have the playbook called The Broken, and this is supposed to really get at the difficult story of Iroh. Where like we have the playbook The Elder inside our prior books that is supposed to be Iroh as mentor almost. Maybe not quite Iroh, it hits Tenzin, but it has elements of Iroh in there. But this playbook is like the Iroh who's lost a lot, who doesn't know where he is, who isn't sure exactly what he should be, and who's trying to find his way back to himself. But he's deciding, am I going to be the dragon of the West? Am I going to be this general again, or am I going to be somebody new? And it's like the invention of Uncle Iroh, that figure that guides Zuko through the rest of the series. So this is a playbook all around about finding that position. And then lastly, we have like the bound, where the bound is, I would almost describe it as the thing I said before, Aang, when he's struggling, should I be the Avatar? That's the icon playbook we have in the core book. But Aang, after he says, I will be the Avatar, but I don't want to kill my enemy. I don't want to solve this problem the way all of these other things of the tradition of the Avatar are saying I have to do it. I don't want to do that to Ozai. That's the bound. The bound is the one who's accepted the role, accepted the responsibility, but they're still not sure that the rules of that role are exactly for them. They have their own sense of justice. Should I deviate from everything everybody's telling me about the things this role demands, or should I follow those roles? Because this role's been around for a while. Like, they know what they're talking about. They're not wrong when they say that this is what it demands of me, and dealing with that struggle.
This idea that Jasmine Island is this place that you can pull into your game that has not been explored, fully in other media, because that's another one of the things when we play in these beloved settings and worlds that we just adore so much. Is there is this concept of where is there room for my characters to be heroes when all these other heroes that we've already heard about. And so some groups hand wave that and say, well, hey, sure. This is an alternate approach to it. But I love this concept of giving this location where those player characters can theoretically become some of the most important people in the history of that place.
For sure, yeah. And of course, because it's always fun, in each of the 5 adventures, several known legendary characters show up to participate, to help, sometimes to cause trouble. But yes, you are, of course, the center, and it's about what you do and how you help reshape that island over time. Every single session ends with like this array of questions to say, what did you do? How did you change things? What is the big impact you had on the island moving forward? So we can incorporate all of that into the next version.
Thanks again, Brendan. Really appreciate it. Hope we talk again soon. Have a good
My
one.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Later,
Have a good
Gators.
one.